Well, hello. It is the Saturday after Valentine's Day and time for a long overdue update on the fish tanks. Again, I love the way the lights play above this corner tank, and looking forward to giving you an update on what's been going on here. In the corner tank, this pie-shaped 56-gallon tank, its growth continues to be very dense, and the last time we talked, I talked about the snail infestation. And literally one night, my wife woke me up and said, "You got to see what's going on out here." And there were literally hundreds, if not more, of snails going up the front glass in the darkness. It was really almost scary, if I can say that. And so determined to do something about that, because we had a similar circumstance of an outgrowth of snails in the office tank. I did some research, talked it over with my friend Bruce, and tried several things. First of all, they suggested taking a piece of lettuce and what do you do with it? You boil it in water for a minute, and then it starts decomposing. You put it in the tank, and the snails all go to that, and then you lift it out and take the snails with it. Well, I tried that, and I tried to put it in a container of some type in the tank so that when it got time to move it out, it would be a matter of capturing those snails as opposed to them dropping off back into the gravel. Not quite as effective as it should be. The other recommendation, especially from Bruce, was to get a couple of clown loaches. And you see in the bottom, going back and forth, one of those two clown loaches in this tank. And I ended up buying 6 clown loaches, which is, I love the clown loach, but it's an expensive fish compared to what I'm normally buying. And the net result was I put 2 in each tank. What I can tell you is this: there is no snail infestation in this tank 2 weeks later. It is, there are probably snails down in the gravel, but they are not coming out, and even when I put in some algae tabs, which typically would draw the snails around, not seeing that happen. So it's been quite effective. And the same thing in the office tank. That one, if you put in an algae tab, all the snails would gather around, the fish couldn't even get to it, they were so thick. Now, not an issue at all. Now, it is the middle of February, and I know that's a tough time of season for fish tanks and fish. And I got to tell you that the fish, even though I've just recently changed the water, I do it once a week, about a third of the tank 2 or 3 times, putting still the CO2 fertilizer and leaf tone fertilizer on a regular basis. And just this morning it was time for the quarterly insertion of the root tabs. And so the plants here are doing well, but the fish are less than ideal, and you may see that in some of the fish here in terms of their closed fins and hanging out toward the top. Now, I just changed the water late yesterday afternoon, and typically that would give them a more healthy look, but for whatever reason, and no, we don't have a problem with our tap water being chlorine or whatever that stuff is, so I don't have that issue. But you can see here a couple of the platies are not doing as well as you would hope, and so it's been disappointing in that sense. Now, there's another story which I'll share with the boat tank about my angels, and give you the end of the story now. I bought 2 young angels and put them in this tank since I was having a problem in that tank, and they lasted a day or 2 and then they disappear. And with so many fish in this tank, it doesn't surprise me that they disappear. If they die, they get cleaned up real easy, so that's not a surprise. There is also a large school of neons in this tank, which I don't see any right now. Oops, down the lower left-hand corner is some of them. So there's plenty of places for them to hide, being a smaller fish, but they typically will be out, and every once in a while I'll buy 5 more and add them in there, and that's sort of keeping the school about the same size, about 15 to 20. And so they're a beautiful fish, and when they school, they look wonderful. So I've been feeding them some baby brine shrimp, frozen baby brine shrimp. Here's that clown loach I was telling you about. Rather small, so I was surprised that it was able to do what has happened here with the snails. They obviously can do what they do. The other thing of interest here, and a change, is the Madagascar lace plant that you're looking at right in the center here. It's got a new set of leaves, and remember I cleaned out this tank completely and put everything back in place, and it never fully recovered from that. The gravel was black with residue, and the plants were doing really well. And I know that plants sometimes take longer to recover, but they're all hanging in there right now. But the Madagascar lace plant, you recall, had these broad, tall leaves. And I'm sure that's going to compare with the Madagascar lace plant that I have in the boat tank. But what you see here is those tall leaves, but they're not as broad as they were before. They're very narrow. So I'm not sure what that's about. They're still beautiful. And I've got to open up some of that kabamba to get more light to them, maybe. That would be key. Those green longfin barbs continue to do exceptionally well. There's 3 of them in here. They typically chase each other around. You see the one showing his backside to us right now. And of course the clown loach follows around the tiger barbs because the coloration is so similar. I think they think they're cousins or something. Anyway, lots of kabamba still growing, and I don't trim it back as much as just replant it. And the red kabamba is doing well here. And of course you have that huge Amazon sword in the back here with 2 others in front of it, each one a little bit less in height than the one behind it. So you have a small one, you have a medium one, you have that really long one. This tank is about 22 inches high, and those leaves hit the top of the water. So you know how long those leaves are. The corkscrew valve is doing well. Not as well as that was before, but I moved it, and it's at least doing okay. And then I put in some jungle valve next to it there, and there's some jungle valve on the other side also. So that adds some height to the Vallisneria growth. As you can see there, it goes all the way up to the top. And the one on the right has been in here longer, and the one on the left, which looks sort of emaciated as I'm looking at it right now, is still recovering from being transplanted into this tank. So anyway, that's sort of where we are on this. I'm trying to think if there's anything else new. Like I said, just disappointed that some of the platies especially are not doing as well. I have been checking the chemistry, and I've used some 7.0 adjustment to it. And it's amazing, you just put that chemical in there, and boy, it turns that water right close to 7.0. When I first tested it, it was down like 6.0. And so I turned around and readjusted that, and hopefully that's going to help the fish get through this winter. Let's swing over to the boat tank. Okay, here's the boat tank, and a couple of things here. You remember at one point in time I had 10 angelfish in here, a couple of small ones, most of them large ones. And over the course of the past month, I've lost every single one of them. Not all on the same day, but certainly when I hadn't been losing any for a long while, in rapid succession. And so this is the tank that really showed up at the 6.0, and I raised it up to 7.0 with that adjustment factor. And so I bought some more small angels, and very quickly lost them also. And so this has not been the angel tank anymore. Don't know what that's about. Temperature hasn't changed. Water hasn't changed. I mean, I do swap out a third of this tank every week, and we use the same CO2, leaf zone, and plant tabs. So I wish I had taken a picture of this one just yesterday because the tank was overgrown with floating plants. And what I wanted to show you here is the latest acquisition. I love Madagascar lace plants, let's just say that, okay? And over at the Hidden Reef recently, I came across some nice looking ones, and it was pretty expensive, $12.95, but for Madagascar lace plant, if it's got a good root system, and this had a really nice root system, and I've taken off quite a few leaves on it, and it's still got about 8 nice sized leaves there. And just yesterday I cleared out that corner to give this particular plant a showcase area, as opposed to being buried behind some of the other plants. Surprisingly enough, even though we lost the angels, the blue gouramis are thriving here, as they have been for a long while. And same thing with the pearl gouramis. And so there's 5 blue gouramis here that continue to grow nicely. There, that should be better. I didn't realize that the timer on this light turns it off to limit the light from noon to 5. And it's just past noon time, so the light in the front had been off, and I have a fluorescent in the back just to keep light on plants throughout the whole day. Anyway, a lot brighter, and hopefully now you can see that Madagascar lace plant even better. I don't know what's with this camera that goes out of focus like it does, but hopefully you get a good view of that. Got a great root system, and really a very pretty plant. Always have loved that. The Amazon swords do very well in this tank, as you can see, especially in this corner over here. There's about 3 of them there, bigger leaves in the back and younger ones in the front. And you also will see there the red-tailed shark right by one of the clown loaches. I love the the red-tailed shark rather. Gorgeous fish, and right next to it is that clown loach, one of 2 in here. And then you have the 2 tricolored sharks that constantly chase each other, and the red-tailed shark goes after them once in a while and sort of puts them in their place. So this tank has got less fish in it than it had before, because you take out 10 large angels and all of a sudden you got a lot of space. But anyway, the plants seem to be doing reasonably well. I've moved them around. The forest of Kabamba over here in the back was overtaking the front, and so I just yesterday trimmed them all back and moved them as a background as opposed to in the foreground. And hopefully that gave some more light to the plants in the front that were being shadowed by that Kabamba. Okay, in keeping with my sister's concern that these are too long, I'll take you into the office tank and not spend much time there. Oh, and I didn't mean to leave out an update on our Christmas present, which is this small betta tank with a divider. And so you've got a red betta on the left and a blue betta on the right. And they do just fine. We had a couple neons, as you may recall, in each tank, each side, and 2 small catfish. That didn't work at all. We lost first the neons and then the catfish. And the 2 bettas are doing just fine. Oh, the one thing I forgot to mention on the bow tank, that beautiful white betta that we had disappeared over the past week. It was doing just fine. And my wife said the other day, I haven't seen the white betta in a while. And I said, yeah, you're right. So I think we've lost that one. I typically don't have success with long-term bettas, although these 2 have been doing just fine, and they're not in that tiny confined space that many people keep them in. And I do change the water 2 or 3 times a week, at least a quart or 2 out of this. The plants are all live plants up there. You can see the Amazon sword doing reasonably well, and the fish seem to be just fine. I must admit, it's more challenging maintaining a small tank like this, because the big ones, they're more stable, and it's easier to keep them clean than it is the small ones. But anyway, we enjoy it, and they're doing well. Okay, we're in the office now, and the office tank has got a couple new male guppies right there in front of you. The split tail, very interesting. And this had the snail infestation too, as I mentioned. And so you're going to see a comet goldfish go by once in a while. He's off to the side here, zipping back and forth. There he is. And he was brought in as another way to control those snails, and I didn't see him doing anything. He looked kind of emaciated for the first week or two. And then I put 2 clown loaches in here. And like I say, the snail's cleared up, and he all of a sudden looks like he has a full belly. So I don't know what happened here. All I know is my snail problem has gone away. The plants continue to be overgrown, and I really haven't manicured this tank like I typically would, mainly because it's giving a lot of hiding space for the babies that are coming from the guppies and the platies that are in this particular tank. And so while I'm not trying to raise those fish, at the same time, between that water wisteria and some of these other thicker plants down here, trying to provide space so that they can thrive on their own. And it's amazing how those tiny sometimes newborns can move so quickly when something comes toward them. You'd think, oh, this one's gone, somebody's going to eat this one. But boy, they just sort of move into another space so quickly. So there's not much to say here. The snail population has totally come under control. I don't want to say it's not in there, because I think they are still in the sand, but if I put a plant tab in here before, it would be just crowded over with snails. And nowadays that's not the case. The fish get to thrive on that. So we'll see how that goes long term. I may get around to cleaning up this tank at some point in time, but for right now, there are 2 clown loaches in there. I see one off to the left. You won't see him, or maybe you will. And he's back in the center of the tank there. And with all so much growth, you don't get to see much of what's in here, which I still recall many years ago, a neighbor had a tank that was totally overgrown with anacris. And it was so fascinating to look at that tank, and you couldn't see any fish. And all of a sudden, a fish would appear from the crowded anacris. I mean, the tank was like a 20-gallon long tank, and it was just filled with beautiful green, thriving anacris. And so you only saw a fish or 2 at a time as they came out toward the front of the glass, and there was just no space between the anacris and the glass, so it was that packed. I've always been fascinated by that. So as a tank overgrown, doesn't bother me in the least, although I must admit, when I go up and visit Bruce, I did just recently, and you saw another video on that, he keeps his tanks very well manicured, trimmed, and they really are show tanks, and I really appreciate the gift he has with his tanks. And I must admit, we both inspire each other in our sharing of this beautiful hobby. Oh, there's one of the clown loaches right there. Whoops. Well, he was there. Take my word for it. Alright, anyway, in the interest of keeping this reasonably short, I'm going to say wish you well. Hope you had a nice Valentine's Day and are enjoying your fish, and I hope your angelfish are doing better than mine. I have a friend who has a beautiful tank filled with Amazon sword plants and angels, and he's just gone through a period of time where he lost most of his angels and had to replenish them. So I don't know, it's a different water system. He's not in our local town, so I don't know what that's all about. Any thoughts? Feel free to share here. I appreciate it, and thanks for those who make those comments. Really do enjoy the outreach and hearing from others, especially as we share some of our challenges in this beautiful hobby we have. Hey, you be good. Back to you in a couple weeks.